On November 18th, 2001, 14s got drunk and mistaking our Sikh turbans and our name for followers of bin Laden, torched our place of worship. Based on Guru Nanak Dev Ji's teachings, everyone is part of my community. I see no one as an other. We responded to the hatred with love expressed in Babaji Singh Ji's powerful statement of forgiveness. There were two miracles. In the midst of this blazing inferno, with flames shooting from the roof, Siri Guru Granth Sahib, the Holy Scripture, wasn't touched by fire or water. And the power of forgiveness, which healed and transformed both individuals and the community, shone through.
20 years ago this month, in the shadows of 9/11, a group of teenagers destroyed a Sikh temple in Central Square, thinking it supported Osama bin Laden.
Since that day, those who worship there have focused on forgiveness. As News Channel 9's Iris St. Moran explains, even in a new place of worship, that hasn't changed.
November 18th, 2001 is a day that is both hard to forget for Ralph Singh and difficult to reflect on.
Someone torched our place of worship.
He is the founding president of Gobind Sadan USA. On that day, the Sikh temple was destroyed.
We went up there and the place was hanging heavy with not just soot, but heavy with the power of hate.
The arson occurring 2 months after the attacks on 9/11 because teens who set the fire did not understand what this place of worship stood for.
These children thought, because of the hysteria, that our Sikh turbans represented followers of bin Laden, and they were doing their patriotic duty.
From the moment they saw the fire, they forgave them. They have even kept in contact with some of those involved. The message then is the same now. We should practice forgiveness and be inclusive.
We can all live together in one community, even if we don't agree. And we don't. There's so many things we don't agree with, but we can respect each other's opinions and be in community with love.
A lesson that continues to stand the test of time. Iris St. Moran, News Channel 9.
On this 20th anniversary of the arson attack on Gobind Sadan USA, which was the first attack on a house of worship post 9/11, even given COVID restrictions, a small but diverse group from across the region gathered to join in our celebration we call Gathering Around the Light, and feel the power of Babaji's presence of love and forgiveness. We hope you can feel the power of healing that drew everyone together, and that you can sense the power to transform the world.
Thank you all for coming. Welcome to Gobind Sadan, God's house without walls. Everyone, regardless of their religion, race, or beliefs, is welcome here. It is Babaji's mission to celebrate the love of God in all.
The room is almost in the scripture, in Christian Judaism, it says God put his hand up and stopped the flame. And we literally saw that. And though Prabhupada and I are shocked, Babaji's message of forgiveness came through powerfully, and the local community came around us.
Good evening from Southeast Louisiana. First of all, I want to extend my apologies for not being able to make the celebration. It was indeed my sincere intent to try and be there, but for reasons unforeseeable and outside my my command, I'm unable to make it. So First of all, I want to apologize, but let you all know how much I truly wish I could be there in the celebration. My name is Hank Meyer. I'm a senior special agent with the Department of Justice, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. And 20 years ago, I was a young whippersnapper of agent assigned to the Syracuse field office. And I had the esteemed pleasure of being dispatched to the scene of the church fire at the Sikh temple. And I remember digging out the scene with some of the local fire investigators. And one of the things that really resonate with me today was the fact that there was this book. I don't know what the name of it is, but there was a book that was somewhat of, I guess you could say, the Bible or the scriptures of the Sikh people in the Gobind Sadan temple. And I was absolutely amazed that this particular book was relevantly undamaged. Absolutely very little damage at all. Hindsight being 20/20, I probably should have paid more attention, that this would probably be the first of many of my amazing experiences in coming to know the Sikh people. And the powerful message that was already there that maybe I just wasn't paying attention to from the beginning. And the investigation continued, and we were able to identify the people that had started the fire, and we arrested them, and it was up to the court's determination to determine the accountability. And then now, 20 years later, we're here to celebrate the growth, the recovery, the love, and the forgiveness. So I think that's what this meeting or celebration is about genuine forgiveness and love. I was raised in a devout Episcopalian, and we were always told to love thy neighbor as you would love thyself. But it wasn't truly until this experience of the fire and investigating the fire and seeing the response of the Sikh people to the defendants that were charged, I truly appreciate and understand what it meant is to forgive and to love. So with this gathering, I hope that you celebrate in peace. I hope that you celebrate tolerance. I hope that you celebrate acceptance. And I hope that you celebrate the love for mankind. This truly was a life-changing experience for me, as being privileged to have been the federal investigator on this particular fire. The relationships that I've been able to develop, and the ability for me to be able to expand my horizons and being able to understand and be able to appreciate further different religions, for that of even the Sikhs, is most amazing for me. And I think the rest of the world can truly take advantage of the lessons learned from this as well. We can all learn from the great tragedy that had happened on 9/11. And then we can also all learn of how we come together as a country in that response, but even more so how we can come together as a country in this response. And that we are much stronger together, united in one, equally appreciative of each and every one of our differences, as we are divided. And I think it's important for us to put our concentration on the love and respect and admiration we have for each other, and how we can come together and support and nurture each other, as opposed to try and find ways to bifurcate each other. So with that, I send you my warmest and kindest wishes. Again, I wish I could be there, but I hope that you all stay in touch, and take care.
Person and freezing them in that particular point, which they could move past if they're allowed to. So by having a clear, open, when we say open mind, the vision just which is accepting, suddenly these kids can grow. And so I had the honor of reading this statement when the federal attorneys were standing there ready to put them away on the first hate crime under Pataki's hate crime legislation, minimum 10 years, and these were 18, 19-year-olds. We didn't want that. And so here's Don Todd, the district attorney's take on it.
Hi, my name is Don Todd. I was an assistant district attorney at the time of the Gobind Sadan arson. I was subsequently elected as county court judge in 2010 and retired at the end of 2020. At the outset, let me apologize. I'm deeply sorry that I can't be present today because in so many respects, the occurrences of 20 years ago has greatly impacted me. Initially, my reaction was one of shock and anger that a house of worship could be intentionally set on fire. Then it became one of wonderment as I learned and saw how the Holy Scripture had been somehow spared of damage. With the coordination of many agencies, including but not limited to the Oswego County Sheriff's Department, the United States Attorney's Office, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, the New York State Police, and the Oswego County Origin and Cause Team, the investigation progressed and 4 individuals were arrested and charged with various crimes, the seriousness of which varied depending on the nature of each defendant's involvement. 2 were involved only in acts of criminal mischief, while 2 others were responsible for setting the actual fire, the arson. It was the obligation of the Oswego County District Attorney's Office to prosecute the defendants relative to any state crimes, and it was for the U.S. Attorney's Office to prosecute federally. Due to these double jeopardy clause, it was agreed that state court prosecutions would go first, and if they resulted in a favorable resolution, no federal prosecution would occur. In that regard, I was assigned to represent our office, and together with the United States Attorney's Office, we sought to obtain an appropriate resolution for each defendant. As part of that effort, we met with Ralph Singh and other representatives of Gobind Sadan to discuss their feelings. As we discussed the various manners in which we could proceed, it was astonishing to me that their overwhelming concern was for the future of the defendants. While they recognized that there needed to be punishment of some kind, it was clear that it was important to them that it should be also one that would give the youths the opportunity for redemption and still be able to live a productive life. Their expressions of forgiveness and concern for the defendants' well-being certainly affected the ultimate resolution of the cases, and from a personal perspective, hopefully it made me a better and more compassionate person, prosecutor, and later as a judge. I think it's important for us to gather and remember this incident because in so many ways we're in the same circumstances as in 2001, and in other ways we are so much opposite. In late 2001, the United States was indeed united. Due to the events of September 11th, Americans were united. However, that unity was often expressed, as here, in hatred and violence against those perceived to be enemies of our country. Today, our country is anything but united, socially, politically, economically, and so many other ways. If we are to have hope for our country's future, it's necessary to learn from these events in the teaching of the Sikh gurus and to try to live in peace, harmony, and forgiveness. Again, I'm deeply sorry I'm not able to be there today, and I hope
Put away for a little longer time, but still reduced sentences. They wrote to us from jail. If only we'd known your stories. If only we knew what you stood for. So we picked that theme and carried that we have to change the narrative. We have to change the narrative to allow for growth and transformation. And so Cassie became, given that Sean Kirst's attention, became the poster child of the one who grew most and was able to grow from and transform her life. She's now a very successful visiting nurse, or travel nurse. But this time she wrote, and I'll try to read this to you. Hello, as many of you know, my name is Cassie Phillips, one of 5 that was involved with a crime committed at Gobind Sadan. I would have liked nothing more than to attend in person, and very sad I'll be missing out of all the love and joy that's come out of such an event. November 18, 2001, 20 years ago, honestly it seems just like yesterday. Only difference is I've gained lots and lots of wisdom. I can't thank this community enough for all the forgiveness and love given. Never in a million years would I have thought so many miracles and blessings could come from such negative acts. This loving, kind community didn't only forgive me when I didn't know how to forgive myself, but they led me to the light. These were the examples I needed in my life to grow, to keep it simple. When love is spread, love will grow, which is exactly what is taking place today. 20 years later, everyone is gathering to celebrate all the love given, to remember the feeling of forgiveness that came after such a devastating event. More or less, sometimes the unkind people are the ones who need kind people the most. Wow. And that was me 20 years ago. I feel like this had made a stronger community. And she takes my name. It's actually Babaji's message of forgiveness has carried over and touched the lives of many, as well as highly impacting my own. Gobind Sadan means God's house without walls. Everyone is welcome with open arms. This is a true statement. I owe you the world. There is nothing I could give you to amount to the love you have shown me. Your power of forgiveness overcame the hatred, healed and transformed my life. For 20 years we have remained in contact, and I know we have many more things to do together. The most important message I could put out there for educators and for parents is to teach your children about diversity, cultural difference, but most importantly, teach them we're all the same. Teach them acts of kindness, and we're all in this together.
Ralph Singh introduced the topic with the story of how the boys wrote from prison, "If only we'd known your story. If only we understood what you stood for, we never would have done this." In response to those words, Ralph developed a culturally responsive curriculum for K-12 education based on multicultural wisdom stories, so children can find their stories, be affirmed in their own story, and also be informed about the stories of those around them. By learning each other's stories, we are able to find a shared narrative in the universal truths and overcome our fear of the other. Sharing our stories provides the basis for being in community together. It has proven transformative for the children. They have been inspired to change the story of the world from one of conflict to peace. The next segment was titled, "How do we prevent and create more inclusive communities through education?"
Babaji, and she was here for Babaji's birthday celebration as well. To my good friend Ralph and the Gobind Sadan community, this message is offered with sincere respect and optimism. I had the opportunity to share quality time with His Holiness Babaji Singh Ji, welcoming him to the city of Syracuse as a Common Council member, and years later at his birthday celebration at Gobind Sadan USA. These were deeply positive personal interactions. It is in that context that I join with you in thought and contemplation at the gathering around the Light Day in honor of the remarkable healing and transformation that grew out of Babaji Singh Ji's powerful statement of forgiveness post 9/11. His message, channeled through you and many others, turned an event based on ignorance into many teachable moments for personal transformation and community healing. His inclusive teaching allowed his followers and many others to forgive the children who mistakenly attacked Gobind Sadan USA in November 2001. His Holiness, during his many visits to Central New York, brought a vision of peace and social uplift. I can speak with firsthand knowledge of the inspiration he has been to all those who have had the opportunity to be in his presence. As president of SUNY College of Environmental Science and Forestry, BSF, I am working to amplify His Holiness's message and Gobind Sadan's efforts to overcome hatred and ignorance, and to reach out and embrace every person as integral and equal parts of our collective community. This is based on a foundation of understanding that we all will benefit from celebrating each other's gifts. Please know that while I am not able to join you at this very important gathering around the light day to celebrate the power of his message of forgiveness to foster compassion and build community, interfaith understanding, and harmony, I will be there in spirit.
And keep showing our love, keep showing our love.
Following here, the topic of this discussion, as Ralph said, is how do we prevent and create more inclusive communities through education. But I need to tell my story first a little bit here, so just bear with me. Ralph's story about how he came to invite me to India is a really abbreviated version of actually what happened. So my wife, Mary, who is in the front row here, if you could just... We live 5 miles away. We had no idea, we lived there for many years, we had no idea Gobind Sadan existed. It was a shame. And I was school board president at the time. And I approached our superintendent once I found out what happened and said that, yes, President Bush had responsibility, the fear that was being fostered, parents have responsibility, the children had responsibility. We think narcotics might have had a responsibility, but the school district had a responsibility, whether or not they were all our students or not. Some of them were graduates from Mexico. So we were talking, the superintendent and myself, about what we could do. And Ralph approached us. And I was very nervous about the meeting that was about to happen, because I wasn't sure what to expect. And what he told us is the same message that we've heard tonight. He came to apologize on behalf of this community for not integrating enough with the Mexico community, and took the blame for what had happened. I had never experienced anything like that. Then I got invited to India. So almost 20 years ago, I traveled to India to attempt to explain why youth set fire to this temple in my community. As a Board of Education president, I wanted to use my visible position in the community to talk about tolerance, understanding, and the role of education in stamping out ignorance. Learning that this was the only place of worship outside of India for this group of Sikhs further devastated me. It was soon after that these people, these victims, approached my community to see what they could do to help, what they could do to bring people together through understanding and forgiveness. And here we are, 20 years later. They invited me and my school to be involved in the film that would document the arson and to follow the rebuilding of the community and temple. The film was North of 49. Dick Breyer in the front row was one of the producers. They invited me to travel to India to meet their spiritual leader, His Holiness Babaji. During my time in India, I found teachings from Babaji about the destructive power of anger. He said, when humans become angry and commit a crime, a wave of poison spreads through the atmosphere. However, if we purify our thoughts, make them loving, serving, and compassionate, the environment of the whole world will be cleansed. I asked back then, could this tragedy actually be the start of something good? I asked this because of something else Babaji said. Everything is within God's control. We humans may only perceive the outcome of actions long after they occur. It is possible that something good may grow out of difficulties. When something is being shaken, there is surely some reason behind it. Again, here we are today. 1 year after my first trip to Gobind Sadan in India, I returned with Ralph, Dick, religious and education leaders in the U.S., and people from all over the world and many faiths to convene a conference, Faith in Service to Humanity. In part, I went back to speak about the role our education system should play to eliminate ignorance. So this is where we can start to pay attention to some of these themes. The group that gathered felt the world was being driven by differences, not by our similarities. 20 years ago. Do we still not struggle with this 2 decades later? We went to India to focus on our similarities and the importance of serving humanity, which is largely why we are here today. Serving humanity. I put forth that a focus on faith, spirituality, and service should be combined with a focus on youth. Family and community guidance is essential, but our education system has a critical role to play. Educational institutions, ESF, Mexico, Central Square, and local communities are places where promoting volunteer service to community has to occur. Volunteer service to humanity. Many young people are struggling. Globally, we see youth who turn to terrorism and fanaticism still today, and this is largely out of despair. Many youth in the West are in turmoil as well. We see this at our college, ESF, right here in Central New York. Internal personal struggles are contributing to a breakdown of self-worth. For educators in the West, it is essential to understand how youth here find personal validation. Understanding the factors of validation, I think, is the first step towards conflict resolution at the adolescent level. Here are two things that are valued by Western youth: material wants and relationship with others. We need to help our youth strive to get beyond material to find happiness from the soul, from within. This means integrating opportunities for service to humanity in all we do. Parental and community guidance is not enough. The education system has to lead as well, where the teaching of service is essential. Thank you. So I think we open it up to discussion.
Let's give them a round of applause. So I get this, at this point, I'm trying to figure out why I'm here. Wow. Yeah. Thank you. That was moving, accurate, thoughtful, insightful, and thank you for sharing that. That was powerful. I'm trying to figure out
sorry to put you on the spot.
How do I follow that?
You were the closest to me.
Right. No, I was the closest on your left. I wasn't the closest to you. There's someone on your right as well. But so I would like to say that currently I'm doing work with educators. You mentioned the babies, you mentioned the children, which I think is very important, that we begin to expose them to experiences and different experiences, and folks that may not look like them, so have the same culture, same values, same visual signifiers, same skin tone, and not treated different because of that. And understanding that knowing more about you makes me better, not makes me worse, right? So when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion in the schools and working with the kids, we try our best to get them to shift their mindset of this new age that we would like in space that we would like for them to grow up in. But I don't think we can lose sight of the fact that there may be some adults that we need to touch as well, because of their ability to have an impact on the mindset of the youth, right? We talk about in school, we want to partner with parents and try to educate a child, because that partnership means a lot. So that's the reason why I don't think we should overlook the parents in this equation. As I was sitting out in the audience earlier, I was thinking, well, why did this happen, right? And it's just because of the way my funny mind works. And there was a purpose, and I think we're still seeking to understand that fully, but it had an impact on the community. It had an impact on individuals. And I think that's one thing that we're trying to do in education, is impact every individual. The shift that I try to share with the educators that I'm exposed to is that you just don't have a room of 30 people that you're trying to educate. You have 30 individuals in the room that you're trying to educate. So when you look at the students, you don't look at the students and say, well, you don't recognize their differences. Their story isn't the same, their journey isn't the same. The reason why they're sharing that space, they didn't get there the same way, but we should all be valued equally. So the diversity piece to me is getting invited to the party. The inclusion piece for me is someone asking you to dance. So not that we're just sharing the same space, but we're actually engaged in that space. We're co-dwelling. I like the term coexist, but I think we've evolved from that. Let's co-dwell. Let's live together. Because of who we are, right? So another thing I like to say is when we talk about diversity and equity and inclusion is that equity piece is, everyone has to, equality is everyone gets a pair of shoes. Equity is everyone gets a pair of shoes that fits. So we're making sure that we're giving you the resources that you need to grow and develop. There's some children that's doing a lot of self-work right now. But then there's some that needs a little more attention than others. And when we identify those individuals, and they may have mistakes in behavior, my good friend said earlier that, loving our enemies, but sometimes we need to love the ones that we love, right? We have children that have mistakes in behavior, and how do we forgive them? We have people that we may pray with, we may live with, we may co-dwell with, right? That we need to forgive them as well. So something happened in this community 20 years ago that left an impact and an impression on a lot of individuals. And we need to somehow spread that message of forgiveness. And it was mentioned by the secretary of a loving community. And that's loving with unity, because that loving community is with unity, right? So how do we take that energy out of this space? And that book is still here for a reason. And we're here for a reason tonight. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Well, as I speak, I want to say that I feel like the least qualified person here to speak to you. I am just a member of the general public.
Which makes you the most qualified.
Which makes me the most qualified, I'm being told. But one of the things that happened in school boards this year is that the chancellor of the state of New York was the person that came out asking school boards and schools to look at their policies and look for areas where they need to improve in equity, diversity, and inclusion. Now, I would like to say, after this gathering tonight, it was just a wonderful moment and everyone embraced it. That did not happen. And it has been a very contentious thing in many communities. One of the saddest things is that some of our districts would say, why do we have to talk about diversity? Our community isn't diverse. And that is so sad that we're still thinking that way in this day and age. We're very lucky in school boards and in our educational community to have people who recognize that this education may have to start at the top before we can filter it on down to our children. Derek is one of these people that is going out to boards and helping them to understand this. Another person that some of you may know is Roseanne Bain, who works at our Oswego County BOCES. And at our BOCES school board meeting, she did a little exercise with us that I would like to share with you. Her presentation to us was called, "If you have a brain, you have a bias." Because as you're raised in your family, there are things that you are taught by a person that loves you that may in fact be a bias. So she told us this quick little story that she said she uses in her groups, and what she asked people to do is to have a piece of paper, I'm not going to ask you to do that, and write quickly on it what their answer would be. She said, I'm going to tell you a story. There was a father and son in a very serious car accident. They were taken to the hospital, and on the way to the hospital, the father passed away. So the son arrived at the hospital and was rushed into an emergency room. The surgeon came in to do surgery, looked at the patient and said, "I cannot operate on this patient because it's my son." So how could the surgeon be the son? Or have this person as the son? Well, of course, the answer is it was his mother. But a lot of us have the bias of gender, where when someone says a surgeon, we immediately think of a man. So how could that be the son? And the interesting thing she also pointed out was with her 20-year-olds, the immediate answer was, he has two dads. Which those of us my age wouldn't immediately think of. So I think using simple tools like that to show to people that they too have bias, and to teach our board members, our teachers, our staff about this so they in turn can understand some of the things that the students are indeed bringing into their classrooms. Thank you.
There was a lady named Iris Heavy Runner Pretty Paint that I met in North Dakota. She was speaking during a Indian Child Welfare Conference, and the purpose of this conference was to help individuals understand and discuss whether or not Indigenous children should be placed with Indigenous foster care parents, or if they should be placed with other people that were not Indigenous. So during this time, she told us a story. Place with no windows and no doors. Now, I told you I was at an Indian Child Welfare Conference, and so what I did was I walked up to her, 20 people. I waited 20 people to speak with her, at least 20. And when I walked up to her, she told me, she said, "You know, I already know what you're going to ask." I said, "Are you clairvoyant?" She said, "No, not at all." She said, "You're the only person in this room that looks to me to be a person of color besides American Indian people. You appear Black African American, are you?" I said, "Yes, ma'am, I am." And she said, "You're going to ask me about that last question." I said, "Yes, ma'am, I am." And she said, "Before you ask me anything, I want to let you know that I never did tell you whether you were indoors or out. I just asked you to name a place with no windows and no doors." She said, "Many times people who feel like they have been divested of in their lives," we just said we got to teach kids and adults, right? People that feel like they have something has been taken away from them will say that they were in a casket, underground, in jail, locked up. People who feel like they have been blessed during the course of their lives, like their identities have been accepted in society, and that they have no limitations, will normally say they felt like they were flying in the air, that they were outside in the field. And you know, I couldn't think of anything, and that's what I told her. She said, "Nobody's ever told me that." And I think that she said that I was going to figure it out myself, and I think I did. And that's because I was in between places. I was in between a place of feeling as a subordinate and also struggling with being dominant in society as well. I was coming to terms with the fact that I was able-bodied and sometimes temporarily disabled. I was coming to terms with the fact that I was in a predominantly white community. It was the only Black person in many places. I was coming to terms with separating myself from a place that I had known, that was familiar to me, that I was walking into a place unknown, society that I did not know. So when I think about what happened here, not only do I think about the resilience of the community, I sit back in awe as to what has happened here, but I also think about the opportunities for people to walk through their own journeys of resilience, even after they have inflicted pain and sorrow. So I leave you with that. And I wanted to make sure that I shared that, but there's only one other aspect, and I realize time is moving, but I want to tell you anyway. So there was one day I was watching a documentary, and this documentary was about water. On the east side of town, they put in the middle of a room water. On the west side of town, they put in the middle of a room a glass of water. On the east side of town, they told people, "Hey, look, Say anything bad, negative, take out your frustrations on this water, just don't touch it. West side of town, they told people, say everything positive, loving, and affirming to this glass of water, just don't touch it. So what scientists did is that they took water from this and they put it on slides. 2 separate parts of town, same town, east and west. What do you all think that the water looked like where people were saying the negative things to? Okay, I think I hear your thoughts. All right, so here's what happened. It was whole, but it looked striated, like it was pulling away, like you have a splat on a wall. It was whole, but it was pulling away from itself. On the other side of town where people say these nice, loving, affirming things to, you've seen it before. Water off of the edge of a leaf, it looks perfectly round. That's what it looked like. Humans are made up of how much water? So the thought is that how you talk to people from way, way, way little, when they're little, just till they grow up, can literally change their DNA. What I have seen here today is how we have talked to people after they have inflicted pain and sorrow has helped in their human development, and I, as an educator, appreciate that. Thank you.
I'm more comfortable listening than speaking, but I did have this thought while you guys were talking. Words are very powerful, but actions may even be more powerful. And so Mark and I were sharing when we showed the film to the participants, many of whom hadn't met one another. Charlie the farmer hadn't met the Jewish couple in the city, etc. And so we invited them to Newhouse. And Cassie, who you heard, had just given birth. And so she had an infant. And the infant, of course, was acting like an infant. And we had seen the film, say the 3 of us and a few others. And so maybe I was first. I took the baby and rocked the baby for a while, and then somebody else did, and somebody else did. And then when the lights came on after the film, there was Ralph with his beard and being a Sikh, holding and rocking the sleeping baby of the arsonist who burnt down his sacred space. And that the students could witness that was maybe more important than the film. Yeah. And maybe more important than anything that I could say or anybody else could say. And that incident became sort of my favorite story in talking about the experience that I had, the privilege I had working on this project. And I'm keeping touch with many of my students, not all, many students. And that story, they retell. So I shared it with you. Thank you.
Share his work.
Okay, Babaji used to say that this is the most sacred place in the world, or one of the most sacred places. Indeed it is. And anyway, my journey will help you understand why I think so. I'm a former global money manager. I was fairly successful. I've published and written op-eds in the New York Times, been on TV numerous times, etc., etc. And I felt a spiritual calling, and my life began changing, and I ended up coming back to Syracuse. My mom passed away to pursue a spiritual path, and it was very ecumenical in nature initially, and I had called, I've been going to like Buddhist places, and, I decided to go to a Sikh place, and I called Ralph a couple of weeks before the temple was burned. And I finally got a hold of him, and he said, "Oh, the temple's been burned. Come on up. We're having a ceremony." And so that began my relationship with Ralph. And then the following summer, I was asked to get people to pray around Onondaga Lake. Again, I've been very blessed. I've always been spiritually gifted. Managing money when you're clairvoyant is very helpful. I was getting people to pray around Onondaga Lake, and that began a whole quest to understand that our region, this northeast corner of America, particularly upstate New York, has been a wellspring for social justice and spiritual movements. Democracy was born on the shores of Onondaga Lake. The women's movement was Seneca Falls. America's first awakening began in the Massachusetts, Boston area. The second was in this region. Mormonism, spiritualism. Anyway, a lot of things were born. And I found a formation that I call fields of consciousness, that there's something physically in the earth. You can't touch it, you can't touch it, but you can feel it. And that's when I became enamored with this place, because I realized that it is one of the most powerful places that I've found. It ranks up there with Onondaga Lake and a few other places. So it is indeed very powerful. But as my quest continued, I also began to realize the power of interactions, that people's intentions, behaviors had on the space. And what I'm saying is, when you act out of love, when you forgive, when you heal, you enhance the space. Conversely, if you are negative, you are violent, you are hateful, you diminish a space. And this space here, what makes it so remarkable, is not the incredible attributes that are here, but what has been added. The love, the forgiveness, the healing, the praying, the meditating. There are incredible things. I've talked about energy vortices. Now, you all think of a vortex, and it spins either clockwise or counterclockwise. Well, I will tell you, all hurricanes spin counterclockwise in the northern hemisphere. It's funny how it's all the same. Anywhere you're a twister, a hurricane, whatever, counterclockwise in the northern hemisphere. Conversely, places like Sedona and here have this clockwise. So the intent affects the movement. Now, this also brings with it more of that energy, let's say, or consciousness that is there. And that's what this place has. That if we go to that old temple area, I would bet you that you could put a spring there. You could drive down a very simple, a well point, 25, 30 feet, and you'd have like the most incredible water. Because this is water that wells up from the bottom of the, not from the bottom, but I should say there's an ocean of water that is always steaming up. And that pulls that water up and creates incredible, what we call living water. That is incredibly healing and therapeutic water. But anyways, what I just really want to say is what makes this place wonderful is not only what it has, but what has been done with it. The intentions and the acts of the people here.
That's what this is about for me. Ralph and I do have the opportunity to go back a number of years. I think we met when I was involved on the board at Interfaith Works before it was called that. It was Interreligious Council or something at the time, I think, when we were on the board. But we've also collaborated in different ways over the years. And one way that I'll just mention quickly is for a few years I was the director at the Huntington Family Center on the west side of Syracuse. And I had the opportunity to ask Ralph to do a workshop with our youth there in inner city on Gifford Street with one of the programs that we had there, working with young people, young mothers and others. And it was probably one of the best days in the 3+ years that I was at Huntington, to have Ralph's presence and a couple of folks that assisted him as well in bringing this kind of message to that environment. And that is what I think all of us are trying to do and encouraged to do. Likewise, I'm grateful to Mattis. Mattis has been someone who, besides his work and his own spiritual quest and to identifying all of these places for us in central New York where we can feel the sacredness of the land. But I was thinking, what are we about? And looking toward the future or establishing the present, and this message today. And I want to just think about the metaphor or the image of this. How we've had to get used to this being masked in the last year and a half or so. But I think, what are we trying to do with a mask? I think of it in two ways. We're thinking of it as a barrier to keep out a virus that is death-dealing, and to be a filter so that what is good and necessary can come through. It's a double purpose, two sides of the coin, that we have these masks. I don't know that there are many of us that enjoy them. I think we look for the day when we will be able to shed ourselves of them. And we know that they've been sadly contentious throughout our society. But I hope that this image of thinking of putting on this barrier on a day like this is helpful to us to think about, what am I trying to not breathe in? What do I want to have a barrier against? And obviously Gobind Sadan, the Sikh community, and many of you have created that kind of sense that we're not going to let that evil, that horror of hate penetrate our breath, our spirit. We are going to filter it out so that what is good, what is necessary for life, what is love, what is the oxygen of our world, which is those divine powers that are shared with all of us, no matter what our religious background. This is what we're trying to allow through that filter. So I'm going to try to think of that more when I resist putting on this mask, or when I resent the fact that I have to wear it. Keep out the bitterness of hate and take in the beauty of life and love. And to just briefly continue that vague metaphor, I think about the vaccination. What do I look at this vaccination is helping me change, and in the way I relate to, again, to the world. And so that the time will come when my whole spirit will be able to react without the mask. I won't need the barrier, I won't need the filter, because my spirit is going to be vaccinated to have achieved a kind of immunity and ability to fight that other kind of power. And finally, the booster. But today's a booster. Today's our booster. This is what this experience is for us today. A booster to say what is good, what is worthwhile, what is of God, however we understand the divine, boosts us. And this gathering today with a diverse group of people, some of whom we know, some we don't know, but with that spirit of the history of the Sikh experience of God, the experience of Gobind Sadan, is a booster to my spirit. And I hope we all feel that booster today.
It was Derek, I believe, who said, now how can I follow all of that? Well, he had no idea. I will be mercifully brief because competing with supper is never good. First, I would like to thank you for allowing me to say a few words. I'm simply here as a representative of the First Universalist Church of Central Square. And we are, again, honored to be asked to celebrate with you today. For over 2 decades now, our two houses of faith have been joined in spirit. And this place is indeed God's house without walls, because there's no God who would make a house with walls. We watched in admiration and in awe as you demonstrated the best of what religion should be. And your presence in our neighborhood has taught us to act as the best we can be. May you continue to flourish here. May you continue to be a living lesson that from the ashes of hatred, love will rise. Unitarian Universalists are not noted for strong beliefs. We welcome everyone of whatever belief, but there is something in which everyone here needs to believe. We need to believe that love will always conquer hate, and we need to believe it every moment of our lives. Thank you very much.
I was a young whippersnapper 20 years ago. I was a parish assistant at the church. Reverend Marks was our elder pastor, and I served with him, alongside him. I was a nurse working in the operating room at the time, and he kept saying to me, "Why aren't you in ministry?" And I said, "Because I'm a nurse." But God had put us together, and as our journey together led, I did attend seminary and go to school and become pastor of the Palermo Church. What I learned from Charlie Marks that day was that we do have to reach out in love. He came to me and he said, "Do you know what's happened at our brother-sister church?" And I said, "Oh, I heard about the fire." And he said, we need to go to that. And he came over here, and he did. He offered anything we had and anything he needed. And we did get together afterward for dinner at the church. That lesson stayed with me all these years. It built a friendship with Ralph that has been a privilege for 20 years, but it was a lesson in life that even though we don't understand each other, we can still love each other. And that is a message that we have to get out to the world. We have to let the world know that even though we're different, we're the same. And even though we come from different traditions and we practice our faith differently, we're still the same. We're doing it in love. It was a great privilege. It has shaped my ministry, and it has shaped who I am and who I hope to be. Our world needs to learn that this world is big enough for all different views, but we still have a common thread that holds us together, and that's because we've been created to love one another, to love and to serve one another. My other hat, as chaplain of the fire department, I reached out saying, I reached out wanting them to come with me, but firemen are an odd breed, just so you know. They do what they do, and they're happy to do it, they're happy to serve, but they don't want to be recognized, they don't want to be singled out, and they don't like to talk about it. My brother, my own brother John, happened to be on that call that day. He was even a younger whippersnapper than me, but he came here to the call, and I said to him, "John, what stood out for you? He goes, well, to be honest with you, it was really just another call. In the beginning, it was a structure fire, and we went. But he said, I had no idea what it really would be. He said, we were partway into the call when someone from the church came up and said, our holy scriptures are in that room. And he said, we worked to protect that area of the house. And we sent guys in to get that book. He said that the thing that stands out in his mind is that book was never hurt. God was in that room. God is good, and we serve a great God. The other thing that he said stood out to him was that as the fire went on and as they were fighting the fire, they noticed that the point of origin was in a unique place. He said that that's what signaled them to understand that it wasn't just a structure fire, that fire had been intentionally set. You know, it's amazing that 20 years later, we learn to trust and love and to be able to walk into a place with so much diversity and yet be united in that message of love is amazing. The events that took place here 20 years ago were at a time that we had been rocked as a country. Terrorism had struck our country, had struck our state in New York City and around Pennsylvania. But then it struck our town, Palermo. Things like that don't happen here. And yet it put us on the map because out of the ashes came blessings. What a privilege to be able to know that we were in that history, that we lived through that history, and today we can testify to that history and use it to be a life lesson to teach the generations that come behind us. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for letting me be a part of who you are. And thank you for all that you have done for us as a community in that love that you so graciously share. You are a blessing.
Yeah, and Ralph and I, we go back at least a decade before that, and he's so charming, you know. He reminds me of a saying by a friend of mine that you know, he's almost aggressively charming, you know, offensively charming. He says, I mean, my friend tries to do it too. He says, I win people over by conducting a charm offensive, you know. He says, you know, I'll kill them with kindness, you know. That's what it is. So I do everything that Ralph asks me to do. And I wrote an editorial at the time of Gobind Sadan fire, and the way Ralph talks about it, I'm the only one, I'm personally responsible for the act of healing that resulted. But I'm exaggerating, of course. And when Ralph asked, you know, thought that I could talk about the media, I've been retired now for a number of years. And I don't write editorials anymore. But I want to write an editorial now because I think the issue is as urgent as it's ever been. That same issue that came up at the terror fire here in Gobind Sadan. I feel that I'm standing in holy ground here. It's the way I feel when I'm at my church, May Memorial in Syracuse. And I'm pretty emotional. I hope I get through this okay, but I do have a couple of things I really want to share about this. And I want to talk about the people who did this act. And Baba Virsa Singh Ji himself put it quite well when he said, the act of forgiving is not the same as forgiving the act. And I want to concentrate on the act for a moment, because that's what the problem is today. There's a lot of people still acting in a way that's terribly wrong, based on ignorance and stupidity. Just today, I mean, we have 2 trials going on, one in Georgia, one in Wisconsin, about the killing of a black man and the shooting on the streets of Kenosha, Wisconsin, based on ignorance and stupidity. Martin Luther King said in one of his edgier comments, he said, the most dangerous things are simple ignorance and conscientious stupidity. The people who did this were motivated by patriotism. They loved their country. They were angry at the terror attacks of 9/11. And yet what they did was terribly wrong. And even though they were caught and tried, punished, they expressed remorse, they were forgiven, they atoned, the act remains. And the acts continue. And the ignorance and the stupidity is still there, out there in the country. And so the work continues. And the remarkable work of Gobind Sadan continues. And I see Dave Pazinski out there, my old buddy. I think I see his family too, his kids all grown up there. Thanks to Dave, I was reminded of one of my old heroes, Thomas Merton, and his letter to an activist about the work, and the work of Ralph and the work of Gobind Sadan. And the work is not easy, and it's not particularly rewarding, and you may not see results for a long time, if ever. And the thing he says you have to remember, Thomas Merton said, the Trappist monk and the friend of the Dalai Lama and Hindu mystics. The philosopher Thomas Merton said, it's about not you, it's about the work. It's about the work. Don't get your personality tied up in it, just do the work. Reach out to others, connect to others. And don't expect immediate results, and draw on your faith, draw on the holiness of this space and the holiness of your work, and realize that your work itself is a blessing in this world. And as you work, you realize that the world narrows down to people. And I've heard it spoken of tonight, the personal side. And the 3 suspects, or the 4, how many they were, the culprits who have been won over in that marvelous statement by the woman who's now learned so much and has taught us so much, me so much. And as Thomas Merton says, it's the reality of the personal relationships that ultimately saves everything. So thanks again for inviting me, Ralph, and thanks for letting me be part of this wonderful gathering.
Been the superintendent at Central Square for 6, and I oversaw the elementary buildings my first year, and that's when I really got to know Ralph. So, we can all live together in one community, even if we don't agree. And we don't, Singh added. There are so many things we don't agree with, but we can respect each other's opinions and be in a community of love. Those were Ralph Singh's words during a Channel 9 interview that my wife and I watched last Thursday. And those are powerful words that I completely agree with. We live in a time where there's never been a greater division throughout our country and throughout our world on a number of different issues. But it's so important for people to find common ground, to show compassion, and to never ever stand in the way of someone's pursuit of life, liberty, and their pursuit of happiness. So I'm very proud to work in the district, in this community. When I came in here, you could just feel the love that he's talking about. And the one gentleman that had spoke first, the secretary, I believe, said that it doesn't matter what religion you are or what your belief system, you can all come here. That's powerful. If all groups of people in our country thought that way, we would just be in a much better spot. And so it's simple words, but it's a powerful message. And so I know right now in schools across our country, really, there's such a heightened sense of if you say the wrong thing and you're going to get this group that's going to be upset, you say it this way and that. Never before have our teachers ever been so worried to say the wrong thing. And I just wish that the message for all students could hear would be literally the first half hour in this room, and to see the affirmation and the nodding of people's heads in the audience, because they feel that too. There is a great sense of love and acceptance in this room. I know some people, I don't know everybody, but everybody was so nice to everybody. And that's an environment that I want my own kids to be raised in. So I look forward at some point to bring my 9-year-old and 7-year-old and my wife in here to take part in the meditation and to be part of a group like this. So Ralph, you are a truly amazing person. You're compassionate, the wisdom, and just the positivity that you bring. I truly feel that your message is going to continue to grow, and we need that message now more than ever. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mark Lichtenstein, and I am currently the Executive Operating Officer for SUNY, which is State University of New York College of Environmental Science and Forestry. But when I first came to know of Gobind Sadan and be involved, I was the volunteer president of the local school district here, the Mexico School District. And I also lived about 5 miles from where the temple is. And that right there is an issue, because I lived there for maybe 15 years and didn't know that Gobind Sadan even existed, literally in my backyard. And that I consider that to be my problem, my fault, that I didn't know that. So I was pretty concerned on multiple levels when I found out about the arson, because I was ashamed that my family and I did not know about this community, this diverse community in our larger community. And then also as a leader and representative of the local school district, and in some of the youth that were involved in the arson were graduates of that school district, I felt we had a responsibility. And it's important to understand too that this whole area is something that I would say is very homogenous. And what I mean by that is there isn't a lot of diversity. There's not a lot of diversity when it comes to political beliefs. There's not a lot of diversity when it comes to religious beliefs. And there's not a lot of diversity when it comes to ethnicity, national origin, you name it. And that's the other reason why I felt that it was important for us to reach out to embrace this particular community, a community that was much different than the rest of our community. I happen to be fortunate that I grew up with a mother and father who, even though I grew up here locally in upstate New York, who were both from New York City, and our family, our extended family, was still in the New York City area, so they would routinely bring us to the city. And so we had the opportunity to engage and interact with people who were different than us, who looked different than us. But not a lot of my peers and colleagues here in Oswego County had that opportunity. So this was kind of an alien culture and an alien people to others here, and I felt an obligation to do what I could to bring people together. So when I was talking to our school superintendent, who's really the chief executive officer of the school, ultimately responsible for the curriculum in the school here, I told him, his name was Scott, I said, Scott, yes, there's a lot of responsibility to go around. You might remember back in that period of time in 2001, there was a lot of confusion and anger and fear, and then a lot of misinformation and a lot of misunderstanding, and it was being fostered a lot by the president at the time, President Bush. And there were Sikhs, as you probably know, there were Sikhs in a number of places around the country who were discriminated against. I remember a story of Sikhs filling their car up with gas at a gas station in New Jersey and were killed, and it was because these people thought they were Muslims. Like, that should make a difference. It shouldn't matter who they were, but there was a lot of anger and fear. And if you represented the other, or somebody that looked or acted or practiced religion in a different way, you became ostracized. So I think the youth that did this were, in a sense, brainwashed too by what was happening in society. But I said, we as a school district have responsibility as well to attack ignorance. I don't think it was all of our responsibility, this problem, but it was certainly part of it. And we didn't know what to do. And we didn't know how to reach out to the Sikh community. But then that's when Ralph Singh reached out to us and came to us. And I was nervous because I, again, felt guilty and didn't know what to say to a representative of our community that had just been hurt. And he came basically to apologize to us for not integrating with our community enough, and I just couldn't believe that. So I did end up going to India in 2002, soon after the arson, and that's when I had the opportunity to meet Babaji and speak to Babaji through Ralph, and that's when I learned of where the message of forgiveness came from. That was important to me. To this day, I feel that that's been a calling. And then we got invited back the year after to speak at this conference, Faith and Service to Humanity, to talk about the role of education and religious leaders. And at that point, that's when terrorism was still a big issue, and we were talking about the role of both religious leaders and education leaders on what to do to attack the issue of ignorance and despair that was happening around the world. So the whole interfaith community in Central New York just trying to come together with education institutions, so a partnership of both, and how can we address issues that are issues of challenges to youth and ignorance. And I think with COVID, I kind of put a pause to everything, but now here we are, we're celebrating, as Ralph said, we're celebrating an arson, but really we're celebrating the ability to come back together and have conversations about what can Gobind Sadan be, what can, in USA, Gobind Sadan USA, what can it be, how can it help? How can we take a look at this location and re-engage Babaji's original vision for this location, which is a place that can engage people who maybe need to do something to serve community, as a way also to do something here that can benefit people in need and the local community, engage the local community in it, but also benefit the local community and learn through that service.
Nipper, I'm the pastor of the Palermo United Methodist Church, and just wanted to share what a pleasure it is to be with the folks at the Gobind Sadan Sikh temple. I met them 20 years ago. 20 years ago, I was a parish assistant at the church, working with Reverend Charlie Marks. And Charlie Marks said, "Have you heard what happened to the church with the fire over on Graves Road?" And so he said, we need to go to our brothers and sisters, and we need to share with them that they are our brothers and sisters, and that we love them, and whatever we can do for them or whatever they need, we are here for them. And that was my first lesson in understanding the Gobind Sadan faith family, that it's just a beautiful place, God's church without walls. And so we came and met Ralph Singh at that time 20 years ago. It's been a 20-year friendship since then. But we came here and we found the love and just a wonderful welcoming community here. When I decided that ministry was the path that I wanted to go into, I kept that life lesson that I learned that night here. And I knew that I wanted to help build a church with the same kind of idea, that we were all brothers and sisters, and that we were able to love one another. Even if we have differences, even if we don't understand each other, we can still come together in love. That diversity exists in the world, but yet there's still a common thread of love for one another. That's what we were created to do. And so it's been a 20-year relationship here with the Gobind Sadan family, and they just love everyone. They treat you like family. You're warm and welcomed when you come through the door. And so it's just a great place that you can share together in faith and love. And so it's been a great journey. The arson that happened 20 years ago, it came at a time that was very upsetting in the world. It was just shortly after 9/11, and so our country had been shocked with terrorism, our own state with the events that had happened in New York City. And then just a couple months later, here was another terrorist act, not terrorist act, but an arson act, an act of harmful nature right here in our own community. And so it really was a shock to us, and a shock to this community. This was a community that had never experienced anything like that before. But out of the ashes of that fire, we've been able to see the love and forgiveness that has been offered here. And it's a great lesson to all who witness it. And so I just am privileged to have been a part of that history, privileged to be a part of their celebration, and privileged still to be part of the future and what that holds for us. And so I just thank them for their love and support and friendliness, openness, and welcomeness here at the seat.
Hello, my name is Donna Blake. I currently am the president of the Oswego County School Board Association and the Central New York School Board Association. And I was invited today to come to Gobind Sadan to learn about an event that happened here 20 years ago. 20 years ago, I remembered the event, but I don't know that it had a profound effect on me like today did. I came here a little bit nervous, a little bit unsure of what I was going to find. One of the things I will tell you, that I sat in the parking lot in my car because I realized that everyone I saw was wearing a headscarf. And of course I didn't have one. It's kind of like now during this COVID era of being someplace without a mask and wondering, what do I do? But the people here were so welcoming that when I got brave enough to come out and say, I don't have a headscarf, they said, well, of course we have them here for you. And I was welcomed into this community. I learned the story tonight of this tragedy that happened and how through their love and forgiveness, they were able to overcome it and become more a part of this community. Our goal now is to reach out to everyone and let them know the story of what went on here in this place of meeting.
Hello everyone, my name is Derek Dorsey, and I would like to say hello to Ralph and thank you very much for the invitation inviting me to this very special event this evening. I would like to say what I witnessed when I walked in this space was magical. I am so proud to be around so much positive energy on the heels of something that happened 20 years ago that was very tragic. There was a fire that damaged a lot of people's hope and faith. And on the heels of that, there was forgiveness. And I was blown away by that approach. Individuals that could be a part of such a horrific act, a mistaken behavior, was forgiven by the people in which they actually damaged a place where they chose to worship and meditate. I learned something from that response, which I think is I'm going to carry on in the work that I do with children, in the work that I do with educators, on for the rest of my life as an example of what could happen and the possibilities if we have the power to forgive.
Hello, my name is Dr. Malika Carter, and I'm here today representing SUNY Environmental Science and Forestry. Amongst the video that you're watching now, you'll probably see other videos of other folks telling you about their experience here today. I will say that it was inspirational and powerful. One thing that I'm walking out of here with today is the power of the concept of forgiveness. I personally am ingesting that as I walk out of here. It is not a weekday, so I don't have to go to work or anything and think about that, but I can personally think about it and I can digest that. And I hope that the videos that you'll see and also the information that you'll see that accompanies this video will help you to think about that same concept. Thank you. Well, the organization to me, from what I can understand right now, and being new to seeing what has gone on in this community, 20 years to this day, there has been a sense of freedom in releasing people to the power of forgiveness. This organization is obviously important to the community and one that I hope continues to thrive.
So my name is Richard Breyer, and I'm a filmmaker, and Ralph Singh asked me if I would tell the story of what happened. And I said yes. I and my colleague, David Coriel, we came here and we began to tell the story, and it's been a long time. So the first stop was at the burnt out building, so I'm remembering it as I tell you, in which we walked through it, and people were talking today about it being sacred and feeling that it was sacred, and I did. And I remember I was shooting the film, so I remember looking back at a sunset and the way the light went through the ghost or the skeleton of the building, and was very touched by that, and somehow that was symbolic. But anyway, this story has a protagonist, Cassie, who we follow from almost the beginning, right before she was arrested, and she was pregnant at the time and a confused little girl, and angry at something, but she didn't know what, and that's maybe why she and her friends burnt down the temple. And then I was there when the baby was born. And I told the story, which I'll tell again. The baby, when we finished the film, the baby was 6 months old, and like infants, not patient and ready to watch a movie. So we showed the film at the university to the participants in the film. Not all of them had met each other. The farmer hadn't met the young couple in the city, et cetera, in the village. And so we brought them all together to watch the film. And the baby was restless and crying. And so we, who had seen the film, took the baby and rocked the baby. And parenthetically, I had my students there to help get food and to make sure the room was quiet and all that. And so I had a group of my students there, and they witnessed what I witnessed, which was after the film was done and the credits ran and the lights came on, there was Ralph with his turban and his lovely beard and looking very much the Sikh, holding the sleeping baby of Cassie's sleeping baby, holding the baby of one of the arsonists who had burnt down his sacred space, his temple. And that to me was a very, very beautiful moment. And it was lovely for me to share and share with you and experience. But it was also particularly lovely for my young students who need to be reminded of the beauty of this place, the beauty of love, the reward of love, the reward of forgiveness, and the aesthetic of it, just the aesthetic of it. It's like going to a museum or listening to a symphony or seeing a sunset. There's an aesthetic when you live the way that Babaji has taught all of us. And I hope the film reflected that. I was pleased. I saw, because of today, I read a review from when the film came out, and the reviewer was negative and said that there wasn't enough talk about the crime. And maybe because I'm now older and like when people don't agree with me more than when I was younger or something, but it gave me such pleasure that what was emphasized, what the reviewer didn't like, I'm sort of proud of, that it wasn't about law and order. It was about culture, and it was about identity, and it was about the aesthetic of living fully, whatever your belief system. So I hope the film conveys that to some degree. Cassie certainly is her words today were just, they brought me to tears. I remember when she was a little 18-year-old smoking her cigarette, pregnant, saying, those people, she was so confused and angry. And here she is. And I remember, again, being with her as she drove to her jail sentence, because that was one of the scenes, because she had to go to jail for the weekend to pay her. And what elegance.